Well, good afternoon and welcome to the first of the ILS Symposium presentations. My name is Ian Mortimer. I'm from Logistic Engineering Services and I'll be taking you through the first session this afternoon. This promises to be a very interesting group of people speaking over the next 3 days with a wide range of experiences and perspectives. And I'm particularly keen to hear from all of the local presenters and their different points of view that they bring to the questions that have been posed to them. So without further ado, let's kick off. So a little bit about me first. So we know who I am, Ian Mortimer. I am ex-Navy. I spent 8 years in the Royal Australian Navy as a communications technician. Left in 1999 and joined Logistic Engineering Services and started working on the Anzac ship program in Williamstown as a technical analyst. I had no experience with ILS. I had no understanding or knowledge of it at that stage, and I certainly hadn't been exposed to the concept of ILS until probably the first year into being with Logistic Engineering Services. I worked across a variety of programs over the next few years, became a lead technical ILS analyst on the Super Hornet project, and then started going through from there and really gaining a deeper appreciation of what ILS is and how, as a maintainer, an ex-maintainer, I can help inform decisions that are going to be made for the support of the capabilities that we're working on. Over the years, I continued to work across a variety of projects, became a project manager on several, including things like the C-27J Spartan, the Poseidon project, and also helped to support some of the newer projects that our company is currently working on, things like Black Hawk, Triton, and newer capabilities, so some very advanced systems coming into Australia. I eventually became the company's business development manager about a year ago and have been involved in a variety of presentations and symposium globally. I've been very lucky to be able to do that over the last few years, such things as the IPS conference in Vienna, Brussels and Florida, but more on that. So we're here really to talk about ILS and the celebration of ILS as well. 60 years ago, DoD Directive 4100.35 was released on the 19th of June 1964, which laid the foundation for the thing that we call ILS now. It really defined a lot of the concepts that became the frameworks and the processes and the systems that we use now. And we can see on the screen, there's even over here, the 9 elements that they define as the 9 core elements of integrated logistic support, which have essentially evolved over time to become what we see, mostly here in Australia, as the 10 elements of ILS. And most of these are going to be recognisable to the majority of people watching today, hopefully. So DoD Directive 4100.35 laid that foundation, and then over the next few years there were a variety of programs, studies and briefings and other symposium that were held to discuss the benefits and the values and occasionally the pitfalls and issues that the US were having with the introduction of integrated logistic support at that time. One of those things was the 1969 ILS Symposium, which was run by the US Material Command and the American Ordnance Association over in the Letterkenny Army Depot in the US in 1969. So this was around about the same time that the Apollo landings were occurring. So you're thinking in a stage where there is a lot of complex capabilities being fielded. There are a lot of post-World War II changes, post-depression changes being fielded into the US manufacturing base, and a lot of changes to understanding the importance of collecting rigorous technical information to ensure that what's being built is either going to land on the moon or will work for the warfighter when it's delivered to them out in the field. This symposium was held over 2 days, fielded a wide range of generals, capability managers, as well as representatives from industry to discuss and pore over the value and the benefits of implementing ILS programs. I won't go through it in too much detail at all, other than to highlight a few choice sections before we get into the questions that have been posed to me. And you can see that even back in the 1960s, around the time of the landings, you still needed a sense of humour to be a logistician. And I'm pretty sure that most of us have actually felt this this issue in the past as well on some of the programs that we've worked on and supported. So just to highlight a few things from the opening address that really stood out to me. One of the first ones was in the first paragraph, they're talking about the formation of the American Ordnance Association in 1919. And in the same year, there was an annual report of the War Department released that noted quite a lot of changes that were occurring in the defence space. And in 1919, they're even talking about things like an illustration that they note there. The National Sectional Stove, which was used by the Army out in the field, adopted for future general use, reduces storage and shipping space to approximately 1/6 of that of the former design, and being made in 3 sections, interchangeable with each other, which makes possible repairs at a minimum cost, which under former conditions would mean the discard of the entire stove. So we've had a shift in the way things are designed for use out in the field for the soldiers and the troops, where we're changing our maintenance concept. Excuse me. So something has been designed to be more maintainable and interchangeable. So rather than throwing the entire stove away, they're now approaching a maintenance program to keep that equipment running at the best cost of ownership. So as it says under the tin there, very familiar, but even 50 years ago, this was still a process that the changes were being felt through the US. There's also the issues in striking the balance between the state of the art and reliable maintainability. So an issue that we still find here in Australia is we're trying to define what's called the minimum viable capability and how that dovetails with speed to capability, while still striking that balance between safety, reliability, and ability to be mission effective. So they're having changes and issues back in the 1960s that we're still feeling today. So one of the reasons I wanted to point this out was we're still coming up against the same issues. We're still trying to solve the same problems. Yes, it might feel like, what's the point of it? What's the point of doing it? But I think the thing is that we're facing different challenges with each era. So back in the 60s, it was a newer technological base. It was a newer way of approaching warfighting, a new way of sustaining and supplying the troops. So they had to find that fine balance there to get that large, complex, very high-tech bit of capability in the field and still being maintainable. And we're still feeling those changes now as we iterate through new types of equipment, new types of technology and capability that we are bringing into country. And the whole concept of minimum viable capability is still something that is being defined for the Australian context at the moment. In section 3 over here, I just wanted to highlight a couple of points. Improved planning and programming of maintenance requirements was a key consideration. Improved databases for life cycle costing. More timely initiation of corrective measures. Emphasis on equipment support demand and technical criteria to influence the reliability and maintainability through life. So all of these things, 60, 70, 80, 90 years old, still being felt and still very current and valid today. This is just a graphic that I pulled out from the symposium notes as well, and you can see that the approach to program management that they used back then is still quite similar to how we approach it now. Systems engineering is still a concept, configuration management. The fact that ILS within the program management world stitches all of these logistic and engineering considerations together, ensures that they're all considered and approached appropriately to ensure the best, I guess, bang for the buck for the capability managers. So hasn't really changed. There might have been a few modifications to some of the terms in here, and the graphic looks a little bit different these days, but it's largely the same process that was originally defined back in the 1960s. Very quick look at the evolution, and the evolution is very important. And it's worth noting that things haven't stood still since the concept of ILS was first put out there. It's continued to evolve and improve over time, something that I will get to later on toward my last question this afternoon. And this is where this symposium essentially starts, is the release of DoD Directive 4100.035 in 1964. And you can see across the world it has continued to evolve out and be improved on for a variety of different users and different countries, but it all comes from the same underpinning pedigree. And this is just another view of the same thing, just having a look at the different timelines and evolution depending on the region that you're from and where they've headed towards. But they're all doing the same thing, they're all achieving the same effect, and they're all continuing to evolve through life. So finally, my questions. Why we're here, if I can get this to work. There we go. There's always a technical issue there somewhere, isn't there? So the questions that were posed to me were, as we see on the screen here, what was the positive impact, what positive impact, sorry, has the concept of ILS made in Australia, and what single development would I make that I believe would further enhance the benefit of ILS in Australia, and what makes me optimistic for the future of ILS in Australia as well. So we'll start running through some of these. And you can see there, I'm a bit of a music person. You're Simply the Best, Tina Turner, 1989. ILS, I believe, is still the best game in town. It's something that has stayed interesting for me and something that I have come to have a definite passion for. And I know it does look a little bit cheesy and corny, but essentially, after 25 years in the ILS game and with LES, my passion for ILS is still one of the reasons I get up and come to work every day, because I believe that what we do collectively in the ILS world to ensure that our capabilities are reliable, maintainable and safe for our operators to use, it matters. So what we do in those acquisition and design phases that lead into the sustainment phases really matter to ensure that our users are safe, our operators, sorry, are safe when they use them. You'll note over on the right hand side, this guy over here, Japanese sushi chef Jiro Ono. It was a bit of a learning moment for me about 15 years ago, watching a fantastic movie called Jiro Dreams of Sushi, learning about a guy who learned to love what he did and realised that after that he's essentially never going to work another day in his life. And that's something that I have certainly taken on board with my approach to ILS, and one of the reasons why I'm still doing it. But we're talking about what the impact has been on ILS for Australia. One of the big things I believe in Australia, why ILS is so important, is the ability for us to achieve platform longevity. And you can see on the screen here, we have 4 examples of platforms, one which is currently still in use, but have been able to stay in use because we have planned for and maintained that ILS data. We've maintained those programs to ensure that these capabilities would be fit for purpose through life, up to the point that we decided to dispose of them. Our Caribou short field and takeoff aircraft for the Air Force, 1964 to 2009, 45 years in operation. That's a heck of a long time to operate a capability like that. The F-111 from 1968 to 2010, 42 years in service. HMAS Tobruk, 1981 to 2015, 34 years in service. And the M113 in service with the Australian Army from 1964 to now. So it's been running and in service and still in use now. I went out and saw one out at Puckapunyal last week. They are still in service 60 years on and still going strong. Admittedly, a platform of that age does have its challenges, but it's a testament to obsolescence management, technical engineering rigour, and you dare say sheer willpower to keep these things in service. And there's certainly been a lot of strides made to consider new uses for these capabilities through remote operations as well, to extend their useful life to try and get the most out of them. So from a value for money platform in Australia, will be an interesting project to have a look at to see what the actual value is over total cost of ownership for the M113 when it's finally phased out. But very important that what we do in the ILS world has helped us keep these platforms in service, operational and safe to use well past, in some cases, their original intended life of type. It's also helped us with another concept that we're introducing alongside minimum viable capability and minimum viable process in Australia, the concept of speed to capability. We want to ensure that we can acquire and build and field these capabilities in as short a time as possible to get them in the hands of the troops and the warfighters so they can actually use them and have benefit from them. We don't want to be running capability programs that take 10, 15, 20 years before we actually acquire the capability. So ILS having a look at the lessons learned, having a look at where we can focus the impact of ILS to ensure we do get the best bang for the buck and what we receive is safe, effective and applicable to the operators when they finally receive it in service is extremely important. There are a lot of lessons learned from introducing the Abrams capability into service that weren't necessarily flowed into something like the Poseidon aircraft, but the approaches were certainly considered. We want to make sure that we are considering all of the spares and the equipment and the training, all the ground handling equipment and everything else that we need, that it's all in place before the aircraft arrives. And the Poseidon was a great program that actually came into service on time and is been taken up by quite a few other air forces around the world and navies around the world as well as a result of Australia's success. A lot of the successes that we felt here, we've rolled out to things like the Black Hawk program, the new Apache program and the Triton program, which I believe the first one landed in Australia last night. These three programs here are being turned on in Australian capability use in very, very short time with a very focused and tailored approach to ensuring that the ILS deliverables are being considered appropriately to make sure that what we get will work and be safe for when we need it. And certainly ensuring that the ILS deliverables that we do get will be safe for use through life as well, so we can continue to enhance and optimize these platforms. It's also had a great impact on safety, supporting the element of transition from sustainment through to disposal as well, and given us a better appreciation of whole of life costs. So the safety impacts on there, good logisticians running a technical substitution program, being able to understand primary and secondary performance requirements for things like a bilge pump. It might have a primary performance requirement to pump bilge out of the bilge, out of the ship to ensure it maintains its weight and balance, but its secondary function might also be as a backup fire pump. And you need to ensure from a logistics and an ILS perspective that you're considering that secondary function performance requirement as well. And that's a great thing that ILS really helps you to consider. You need to think of the whole picture of whatever it is that you're working on. Transitioning from sustainment to disposal. Are there opportunities for us to use common parts, facilities, training and personnel for another capability that might be coming in? So we're realising better economies and not wasting equipment and support systems as well. And also giving us a much better understanding of the whole of life costs. So being able to collect that data and actually make use of it for the next project to help us forecast and fine tune and to help hopefully achieve those minimum viable capability requirements without sacrificing safety or capability. I could honestly keep going all day, but I'm looking at my timer and there are still other presentations to come, so I'll keep moving on. Is there a single development that I'd make that would further enhance the benefit of ILS in Australia? Absolutely, education. And like Cher said, if I could turn back time, I would love to go back and provide an awareness and an understanding of ILS and the concept of how we develop maintenance to myself as a young technician, a young maintainer going through technical school, so I can appreciate why we do maintenance. How has that maintenance been designed in the first place? What's the importance of ILS? Why am I being asked to collect all of this information around a failure? What's the purpose of it? How is it going to help me? These are the things that I think should be taught to all of our operators, maintainers, and pretty much anybody joining defence or coming into defence industry to ensure that ILS is that thing that is understood. It helps us achieve basically what we're trying to deliver to the customer at the end of the day, something that is applicable, effective in the right time, in the right place to the right person. It's probably the one thing that I would definitely push. I know that some other organisations in other countries, I believe the New Zealand Defence Force, are including ILS training as part of the key base training for all new troops, aircrew, sailors coming into the service as well. So they do have an awareness of this from the very beginning, which is, I believe, quite important. So what makes me optimistic for the future of ILS in Australia? Well, Eddie Vedder said it best, it's evolution, baby. ILS is not a steady state thing. It's constantly evolving. We're seeing quite a lot of changes at the moment with standards and specifications. the S series, the Gear standard 0007, DEFOS 5691 in Australia, the DEF stand 0060, 00600 in the UK. There are constant changes going on to all of these standards and specifications, which demonstrates the value to them. We obviously have a need and a desire to improve them to make sure that what we're doing is giving us the best value for money, and that is allowing us to bring these capabilities into service for the best cost, but providing that reliability, maintainability and availability to our end user. There are a lot of things like technology changes. So we have digital twins, GPTs, large language models, data visualization projects. All of these things can help to mitigate some of the issues that we're seeing with the availability of personnel. A lot of the people who do ILS and work in ILS have the same colour hair that I do. We're not certainly getting any younger. So technology is going to be one of those things that can help shorten the gap between bringing new people into the industry and allowing them to be effective and realise the same benefits in an ILS program that people with a lot of experience currently have. Doesn't mean that we won't always need people. We'll certainly need to have people in place as well, but technology will certainly help us continue to be effective in this space. Standards, specifications, global forums, the IPS conference. I go to these things fairly regularly, and it's always great to see that there is a large passionate user base in the ILS world globally that gets together to talk about the importance and the benefits of improving our ILS programs. So that does make me feel optimistic for the future of ILS in Australia. We certainly place a lot of value in it. We have a lot of great people working in defence at the moment to improve and update our specifications and standards and ensure that they're going to be fit for purpose, both for defence and industry going forward. So I just wanted to take a moment to highlight some of the closing remarks from the ILS Symposium in '69 by Colonel Benjamin. And one of the things that really stood out to me was going back to one of my earlier questions, and they're highlighting that it's important to ensure that they have personnel who are trained and capable of following that ILS roadmap. So ensuring that all of those analysts and stakeholders who are supporting that program understand what ILS is and what it is they're trying to achieve. It's very important to ensure that everybody, including us subcontractors, understand what it is they're trying to do and the terminology and language and framework that they're using as well. The definition of what optimum is. Stressing the importance that we need to spell out exactly what we mean by optimum support. Again, when we're asking industry or talking defence about what it is from an optimum support and capability or a minimum viable capability, we need to define and understand what that is on both sides. And if it does change for either of us through the program, we need to make sure that we're having that conversation to ensure that what's being delivered at the end of the day is still applicable and effective. He talks about fragmentation as well. So a lot of fragmentation of efforts in conducting ILS. A lot of areas do and still do become stovepiped and don't necessarily talk to each other. And depending on where you are in that framework, ILS might mean something different to you at a particular stage that you're in as well. So again, having those regular discussions and communicating what it is you're trying to achieve and where you are in that framework can be very important to bringing other people along the journey with you. And finally, on the right-hand side, talking about ensuring that planning decisions are made as early as possible, particularly with life cycle cost and life cycle cost analysis. The importance of ILS begins at the very beginning of a project, and it goes all the way through its life. So the earlier we consider and plan for and maintain our ILS program, the better off we're going to be in the long run. That's really it for me. I do realise it was quite a lot to fit into a 20-ish minute video, but I do thank you very much for your patience. I certainly hope that we'll continue to have these discussions going forward and have opportunities for further symposiums as well going forward. So I've only overrun by a little bit. Hopefully there'll be still plenty of time for the other presenters to fit in. And as I said, I know there's been a lot to digest from the presentations. I look forward to the discussions that I'm sure they'll generate. and the opportunity to talk with you all again in future. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the symposium presentations. Goodbye.